But I'll tell you, as counterintuitive as that seems, being the optimist leads to a more fulfilling life. Because again, that healing happens when you're willing to be vulnerable, when you're willing to practice that humility, that vulnerability, and you're able to find that community. It's just a much more meaningful place to be. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Flow Over Fear podcast, where it is our mission to help you to rise above fear and realize your ultimate potential in leadership and life. I'm your host, Adam Hill, and it is my goal to share with you the human side of high performance. My guests share their experience with fear, anxiety, struggle, challenge, and most importantly, despite all of it, how they rose above it to achieve incredible results. So, if you're ready to rise up, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Flow Over Fear, where I'm going to do a solo episode today on 3 things. And today I want to talk about some of the reflections that I have on my recent birthday. I recently just turned 44. And the reason that number is important to me is because it represents a decade of significant transformation and growth in my life. More has happened in the last decade than in the previous 3 in my entire life. And the whole reason that is because I transformed my life. And that happened a decade ago, from my 44th birthday when I was 34. I had a little over a year of sobriety. And the reason that a year of sobriety was important was because at a year of sobriety, that's really when the fog started to clear. That's really like when I started to feel like I had transformed my psychological and my emotional and my mental well-being, because I'd worked so hard in it in the previous year. I went to meetings every single day, and I learned from people in that group, and I learned a lot over that year of sobriety that communities, how important communities are in our life, the right communities. The communities that are there to support us, the communities that have what we want. And so that year of sobriety represents that time where I was really trying to get the fog out of my brain. And it wouldn't really be until about a year of sobriety that I would discover what I really wanted to try to go after and started to dream again. So it wasn't until really the age of late into my 33rd year, but when I turned 34 and ultimately with a year of sobriety, that I started to dream. And it was a powerful turning point for me because I actually started to have this point of reference in my life that I had a year of sobriety at that point. I had done something that I never thought that I could do. And if you've been in the midst of addiction or alcoholism or anything like that, in the midst of hopelessness, you know what I'm talking about. You know that the act of looking back and realizing, wow, I was able to stay sober for an entire year. Feels like a miracle, but at that time it feels like, wow, I wouldn't have had it any other way because it was such a blessing in my life. And so I had that powerful point of reference for things that I could achieve. And I was always told in that first year of sobriety that I shouldn't make any major life changes. That's what they tell you in your first year of recovery, because they want you to focus, because you're supposed to focus on solely on recovery. It's supposed to come first in your life, and that's important. Sobriety still comes first in my life because without it I have nothing. But it was an important concept because I had to go through that healing process. And you have to heal your wounds, your psychological, your emotional wounds, before you can start to empower your mindset. And a lot of us fall into that trap where we try to do the empowering work before we heal. And it's almost like running on a broken leg. You just can't do it. You have to let the leg heal before you can start running on it or strengthen it. Same is true for mindset. And I'm so glad I learned that lesson in sobriety. But it was with a year of sobriety that I finally felt that the fog had cleared. I started to dream again. And that's when the transformation started happening over the next 10 years. And as I look back on that last 10 years, and I even look back farther on the years previously, there's just like this brick wall that exists between the ages of 33 and previously, where it was just like this darkness, right? I mean, I've healed from it, so it's okay. I'm okay to think about this, but it's just like, wow, that all of that entire period between the time I was 18 and 32, was just like this dark time of 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 basically just kind of white knuckling it through most days, trying to live through the paralyzing fear and anxiety that I had in order to get to my next drink at that night. But after I turned 34, or after I turned, after I had a year of sobriety, and really by my 34th birthday, I didn't have that block anymore. That brick wall was no longer up, so I could actually pursue things that I wanted to achieve. My limitations were gone. And that's what I'm here to tell you is that the only limitations that you have are up here. The only limitations that you have are in your mind. And you can have the opportunity to overcome those limitations. If you first go through the hard work to heal and then actually start to empower yourself, you can do that. And as I reflect on the last decade, I realize that there are so many things that are a blessing in my life, not just the idea that the fact that I've been sober in that time, and that's led to all of these achievements, but all of the great things that I've been able to experience, the adventures that I've been on, and the fact that I've learned that adventure is the antidote to anxiety. It was really, really hard. It's really difficult to narrow down 3 specific things that I can call reflections on the last decade, because there's so many. I mean, there is the fact that adventure is an antidote to anxiety, and there's many other things like that. But really, I wanted to try to bring home these 3 ideas and share them with you. And the first reflection on my 44th birthday on the last decade that I have is something that my sponsor once said to me early on that really attracted me to that program. That things don't get easier, but things get better. And that may not sound very, hopeful necessarily, but or it may sound very stoic, but it's an important thing. And the first time I heard it, it broke my heart, because I'm like, well, I don't want things to be hard. I don't want things to be difficult. I've gone through enough difficulty. Why do I have to go through more? Why me? I was playing the victim instead of seeing that as something more meaningful. But as I went through that process of sobriety, and even especially over the last 10 years, I really began to understand what that truly meant. That things don't get easier, but they get better. We don't want things to get easier. We want to be challenged. We need to be challenged in order to grow. And let me tell you, I've been through, my family has been through, we've all been through significant challenges over the last decade. Significant challenges that in a previous life would have taken me out, would have caused me to drink, or caused me to rebel, or to fight against it. But, as hard as they were, as difficult as those challenges were, still made it to the other side, and I grew stronger on the other side, because things haven't been easy. If things had been easy, I would have been bored. It would have been a boring life. And boredom, and idle hands are the devil's workshop, as they say, right? So those challenges have only made me stronger. They pushed me farther beyond my comfort zone than I had been previously. They have, and because of that, they elevate us. And that can happen to you too, if you can embrace the challenges in your life as opportunities for growth. A lot of times when we look at something that makes us afraid, or makes us angry, or makes us fearful, our first reaction, and it's important to point that out, is that it is a reaction, is to fight against it, to push it away, or to yell at it, to get angry. I don't want you here. You shouldn't be here. But the reality is if we step out of ourselves for a moment and look at it for what it's telling us as a signal, as maybe an opportunity, it actually can provide you the growth that you need to better face those challenges in the future and be given that responsibility to have a fulfilling life. Think about a challenge that you've had in your past. Think about your mindset toward it. Think about a time where you have been impacted so deeply by a challenge that you've had that has helped you to grow. Maybe it was a new fitness pursuit, maybe it was a business you started, maybe it was that. And you can look back on that challenge now and say, wow, thank goodness I was able to go through that the way I did, because it led me to this moment. All of the challenges that I've experienced in the last decade have led me to the growth that I've experienced in this moment. It's because I changed my perspective on how I view those challenges. No, they're not pleasant in the moment. No, they don't make me feel happy in the moment. And yes, a lot of times I do crumble under their pressure. But the thing is that they've helped me to grow and become who I am today. And I'm pretty damn proud of that, even though those challenges have been overwhelming. And the second thing that I can look at as a reflection on 44 is something that I want everybody to hear deeply that's going through a challenging time right now. And that is that there is hope and there are miracles beyond hopelessness. The first day I got sober, the day that I got sober, was the most hopeless day of my life. I thought that there was no way out for me. I was a danger to myself and others. I had just caused an accident that could have hurt or killed somebody or people. I recognized that I had no place on this earth because I was a danger to myself and others. Primarily, I didn't really care about myself. I cared about the fact that I could possibly hurt others, and I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to stop drinking. I felt hopeless. There was no future that I could conceive of where I was a productive member of society, where I could actually contribute. I felt so ashamed, so demoralized. And I know that a lot of people experience that level of hopelessness in this world for a number of reasons. But I walked into my first AA meeting. I started getting the healing. I started getting the help, and I was willing. And I walked into the first 4 elements of the necessary components of healing, which are vulnerability, honesty, willingness, and community. And those 4 elements helped me to heal. And as I healed, I began to see more optimism in my life. I began to see more hope. There's been hope in my life to the point where, everything that's gone well that I've achieved and accomplished and pursued over the last 10 years has been a result of just being able to of the communities and that I've been involved in, of the people that I've surrounded myself with, and the willingness that I've had to continue to heal, and the vulnerability I've had to share my story. All of those elements have helped me to level up to the point where now I see things. I see the miracles that exist. I see the hope that exists beyond hopelessness. I also see that there are a lot of cynics in this world, a lot of people that want to say, yeah, but that's a terrible thing to do, or yeah, but people are garbage, or yeah, but everything is wrong. Yeah, there's a lot of that in the world. There's a lot of cynicism, and it's really loud. It's really loud. But when you could start to turn up the volume on the things that are powerful, that are meaningful, that are hopeful, that's where you start to see the miracles. And that's not an easy process. It's actually a very risky process, because it is incredibly easy to be a cynic. It's incredibly easy to look at the world and say, hey, that person's garbage for what they did. It's really easy to do that, to judge people on their worst moments. It's very easy. And when you do that, here's the benefit to you when you're able to do that as a cynic. You get to either be you get to be right when when things actually don't go their way, or it turns out that they did do something bad, or you get some sort of virtue from it, from people around you, or you get to be pleasantly surprised when you're not right. That's the beauty of being, that's the benefit of being a cynic. It's a simple and lazy way to go through life. But here's the benefit of being an optimist, or here's the challenge of being an optimist, rather. The challenge of being an optimist is that a lot of times you're putting yourself on the line on a big idea, or the fact that there is hope, or the fact that there is beauty in this world, and that people are wonderful, and people want the best out of life, and that people have the opportunity to succeed, and that the best things are going to happen, and that maybe there is a higher power looking out for our well-being. But the thing is, we could be looked at and said told we're crazy for thinking such a thing, because maybe the evidence isn't there. Maybe we're not. Maybe we're wrong about that, and then we're ashamed for having felt that way in the first place. But I'll tell you, as counterintuitive as that seems, being the optimist leads to a more fulfilling life, because again, that healing happens when you're willing to be vulnerable, when you're willing to be practice that humility, that vulnerability, and you're able to find that community. It's just a much more meaningful place to be, especially in a world that is where cynicism is loud. Be a loud voice for optimism. And I guarantee that you'll find hope, and you'll find those miracles beyond the hopelessness. As hopeless as you may feel right now, in whatever situation you're in, there is hope and there is help. And if you're really, really suffering, if you're really struggling right now, please know that there's help out there. There are people, there are communities that have been through what you're going through. There are people in communities who've been through what you're going through and now have what you want. All you have to do is reach out and get it, and be optimistic about the way it's going. You don't have to be optimistic now. I know that's hard, but you can grow into that and find the hope beyond the hopelessness. And I'll tell you, that's an abundant life worth living. Take it from me, a former cynic. And then the final thing that I want to share with you that is a reflection on 10 years of transformation is that there's a quote by Bill Gates, I think it's attributed to, that you tend to overestimate what you can achieve in 1 year, and you underestimate what you can achieve in 10 years. And this is absolutely true. A decade ago, I called my shot. And the shot I called was I wanted to qualify for the Ironman World Championship. I had never done a triathlon before. I wasn't even healthy. I just quit smoking a few months prior. But I remembered like how inspired I was watching the Ironman World Championship. And I had, again, this ideal of optimism floating in my mind that I wanted to achieve something more in my life. And Ironman became that beacon that I wanted to chase. And I wanted to do the World Championship. And I knew how hard it would be. I knew that I would have to become one of the best, of the top 1% of age group triathletes in the world. And I also knew that if I was going to achieve that, to set a goal at that time when I had zero experience, when I didn't even know how to ride a road bike, I could barely float in a pool. It would be ridiculous for me to assume or even plan on trying to achieve that in 1 year. And when sometimes we set these big goals for ourselves. We say, all right, in a year, I'm going to have a 6-pack abs. I'm going to have this. I'm going to have that. I'm going to have a $1 million, whatever it's going to be. I'm going to have that in a year. And those are lofty goals, and they're really often very hard to achieve in a year. And setting those timelines are a lot of times very counterproductive for us. Setting a 1-year timeline on big goals is incredibly, it can be harmful to our goals. But I'll tell you what, I didn't achieve it in 1 year. But if I were to tell myself, yeah, I want to achieve that within the next decade. Well, now I'm putting myself way out there. Now I'm underestimating myself, because it didn't take me 10 years to completely transform myself into what I wanted to become and become an elite triathlete. It took me 4. It took me 4 years to qualify for the Ironman World Championship, not 10. I underestimated what I could actually achieve when I put the discipline and the work into it. So it's definitely something to think about. When you're thinking about your long-term goals, meaning beyond 3 years, your really long-term goals, really shoot for the moon, shoot for the stars on what you want to achieve in that time. And don't set a specific date, but just put it out there that within, anything beyond 3 years, don't set a specific date. Long-term, just say where you want to go. And then take that big, hairy, audacious goal, which might be an Ironman World Championship. It might be running a successful business that is changing 1 million lives. And it might be speaking on the stage for millions to hear. But take that goal and start funneling it down into what you can achieve this year and get more specific and more realistic about what you can achieve in 1 year. Because that's where the rubber hits the road. And this is what's important. Because a lot of times, even though we overestimate what we can achieve in a year, all we have to do is get 10% of the way there to our big, big, hairy, audacious goal. Can we do that in a year? Chances are, maybe not. But the leverage or the momentum that we build by getting started, by just making the effort to go, is how we can level up. And that's one of the reflections I've had is like when I look back on what I've achieved in the last decade, and I really, really hope that you'll do this exercise too, really, really reflect on your last decade and look at how big your accomplishments have been. I've had the opportunity to read this book recently called 10X is Easier Than 2X. And it talks a lot about how striving for 10X results is actually easier than striving for 2X results. And it makes a lot of sense when you read it. But the whole point of it is that it tells us that we have gone 10X in our past. Regardless of who we are, we have gone 10X in our past. Think back when you were a child. There was one day where you were not walking. And then all of a sudden you were walking. That's a 10X jump. You weren't talking at one point. Now you're talking. That's a 10X jump. Graduated from high school. You graduated from college. That's a 10X jump because your opportunities and your capabilities expand by that much. Look back on your life at those 10X jumps in your life. And when you do, when you see that, you'll realize that those are points of reference for what you can achieve in the next decade or the next in the next iteration of your life. And it doesn't have to take a decade. It may not take a year, but it will probably not take a decade to achieve if you just keep going after it. And so those are some of my reflections on being 44, on the last decade, on a decade that included a lot of transformation. And it comes from a man who at the age of 32 was in his most hopeless state, not wanting to go on with life. At the age of 32, I just didn't want to be a part of this life anymore because I thought I was a danger to others and to myself. I thought there was no hope for me. But when I started opening my mind and being a little more optimistic and leaning into the right community for support, my life changed. And a decade later, I'm living a life of abundance. And this life, by the way, it's a life that's not easy. But man, it's better and it's worth it. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Flow Over Fear podcast. If you'd like to learn more about getting into flow and learn the foundations of flow, I have a free video series on my website at www.adamcliffordhill.com called The Foundations of Flow. Feel free to go there and download it and start your journey to rising above fear and achieving greater flow in your life. And if you like this episode, and I'm guessing you did if you stuck around for this long, then please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button, and you will receive notifications when I have new interviews, new recaps, and new trainings that pop up on YouTube. Thanks again for joining us.